I had always considered myself resilient, a survivor of life's cruel twists. But the shadows that haunted my mind, growing denser with each passing day, pushed me to seek help. Dr. Evelyn Haskins came highly recommended, a beacon of hope for lost souls like mine. Little did I know, my hope would transform into my darkest nightmare. From our first session, Dr. Haskins was unlike any therapist I'd encountered. Her office was dimly lit, walls lined with books on psychology, occult, and manipulation topics I assumed were for academic purposes. Her eyes, a piercing blue, seemed to delve straight into my soul, unearthing fears I hadn't known existed.
"You're stronger than your fears,"
she'd say, her voice a soothing balm.
"But first, you must confront them head-on. That's the only way to true healing."
Her methods were unconventional. Her motivation, I would soon discover, insidiously twisted. It began with simple tasks.
"Write down your darkest thoughts, your deepest fears,"
she instructed. And I obeyed, desperate for liberation from my own mind. But as weeks morphed into months, her requests grew stranger, darker.
"Confrontation is key,"
Dr. Haskins insisted.
"You must face what you fear most, physically and mentally. Only then can you truly be free."
It started with an exercise she called night walk. At midnight, I was to walk alone in the most isolated part of the forest near my home, without any light. The whole experience was petrifying. Each shadow seemed to whisper my name, each twig snap a predator ready to pounce. I returned shaking and drenched in cold sweat, but Dr. Haskins was pleased.
"Excellent. You're making progress, but deeper fears require more significant acts."
Her smile, once comforting, now seemed predatory. The assignments escalated swiftly. What began as confronting childhood fears, darkness, isolation, height, morphed into actions that twisted my gut with unease.
"True fear,"
she explained,
"comes from losing control, from crossing lines you never thought possible. Morality is the chain society uses to bind us. Break it. Feel the exhilarating freedom."
She coaxed me into vandalizing a local monument.
"To conquer fear of societal judgment,"
she claimed. Each task was a test, a step on a dark ladder leading me away from light. Guilt and fear became my constant companions, whispering doubts that grew louder each day. "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked, shaken by my reflection, a hollow-eyed stranger.
"To free you,"
she stated simply.
"Your fear is control. Once you've done the unthinkable, what's left to fear?"
Her manipulation had become my addiction. Each completed task brought a twisted sense of achievement, followed by a crashing wave of despair. I was trapped in a labyrinth of her design with no Theseus to guide me out. The final session arrived like a verdict on my soul's trial. Dr. Haskins greeted me with a grim smile, the final task waiting like a guillotine.
"For your final act of liberation,"
she began, her voice a serpent's whisper,
"you must confront the ultimate fear, power over life and death."
The room spun. She couldn't mean what I thought, but the gleam in her eyes, cold and calculating, confirmed my worst fears.
"Think of it as a sacrifice for your freedom. To truly be free of fear, you must hold a life in your hands and choose."
I stared at her, horror gripping my heart. This wasn't therapy. It was a descent into madness. Images of my tasks flashed before my eyes, each a step down a path I couldn't return from. But this was a chasm with no bottom. "I won't," I whispered, voice cracked with despair.
"You will,"
she countered, her voice laced with dark confidence.
"because if you don't, your secrets, your fears, all you've shared and done, will be exposed. Imagine the fear then."
Dr. Haskins presented me with a name, an address, and a chilling directive. My mind reeled with disgust and fear, battling the tendrils of control she had wound tightly around my psyche. The threat of exposure hung over me like a guillotine, poised to sever me from the last vestiges of my sanity. I was cornered, ensnared in a web of manipulation and blackmail. In a moment of twisted clarity, I realized that Dr. Haskins had been grooming me not for liberation, but for her own perverse agenda. With a heart heavy with dread, I found myself outside the address she had given me, the night air suffocating, thick with my impending betrayal of all I held dear. The moral chasm before me was vast, yet Dr. Haskins's blackmail pushed me inexorably forward. Each step felt like a descent into an abyss from which there was no return. But as I stood there, the tools of evil clasped in trembling hands, a spark of rebellion flickered to life within the dark recesses of my mind. This was not who I was, not who I wanted to be. Fear had been my constant companion, yes, but to cross this line would be to resign myself to an existence devoid of light, forever haunted by an action born of darkness. In that moment of defiance, I chose uncertainty over becoming the monster Dr. Haskins sought to mold me into. I couldn't carry out her final task, couldn't extinguish a life to save my own shadowed existence. Instead, I turned the tools she had provided against her, the documented tasks with her handwriting, and my journal of dissent. It was evidence of her manipulation, her psychological torment. But I was under no illusion that exposing her would be simple or without consequence. Before going to the authorities, I ensured that copies were safely hidden away, leverage against any attempt she might make to silence me. Then, one early morning, I left everything behind. My home, my life, any semblance of normalcy, and became a shadow among shadows, slipping anonymously into the police station to deliver my evidence. The fallout was immediate and chaotic. Media frenzy whipped the city into a storm of outrage and fear. Dr. Evelyn Haskins was arrested, her mask of respectability torn away to reveal the monster beneath. But even as her trial unfolded, painting the city with lurid tales of manipulation and darkness, I remained hidden, a ghost, haunted by memories of what I had almost become. I knew too well that the story didn't end with her arrest. Her connections were vast, her influence deep. There were those who believed in her twisted philosophy, and others who saw me as a loose end, a risk to be mitigated. The police, though grateful for my role in her capture, would still want answers. Answers that could expose me to the world, to her followers seeking retribution. So, I remain hidden, moving from shadow to shadow, a life fractured by fear and guilt. The therapy of fear Dr. Haskins prescribed has become my reality, a never-ending session with no reprieve. Each day is a lesson in survival, in staying one step ahead of those who might seek me out for their own reasons. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.